and to Comrades in Arms. This program is a series of interviews done at Branch 98 of the Royal Canadian Legion at Kingston, Nova Scotia. The purpose of these interviews is to highlight and record for posterity the careers of our members who served in Canada's armed forces. Today we have a very distinguished member of the armed forces who I will never do justice to his career, but we're going to try. Mr. James Cameron Lovelace, and we'll be back to hear his amazing story in just a few moments. When I do these tapes, ladies and gentlemen, I usually read a summary of the career before I start to do it. And certainly this one, I ran out of eyesight nearly trying to get through this one. And as I said in my introduction, we will never, ever do justice to this gentleman's military career alone. And the rest of his biography is mind-boggling as well. But I'm not going to talk any longer, because we'll need all the time we have to listen to him. James, if I may call you that?
Please do.
Thank you, sir.
Jim, if you wish.
Jim?
Yeah.
Very well. That's
JC, some people call me.
All right, Jim. You were Nova Scotian, born in Sydney.
I was born and drug up in the shipyard in Sydney.
In Sydney, right. And when was that?
That was April the 29th, 1920 at 4 o'clock in the morning, which was exactly 17 months, 17 weeks, 17 days, and 17 hours after the armistice at 11 o'clock on the 11th of November, 1918.
There you are.
I like number 17.
I noticed that, yeah. You have a knack for figures. Well, you grew up in Sydney, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Did
Went to school there.
Went to school there.
Yep.
All right. Till what age did you move away?
I graduated from Sydney Academy in 1938 at the age of 18.
Aha.
And then I worked for a year for Bert Sampson Motors,
Yes.
selling Hudson Terraplanes for $700 each.
Each, right?
Brand new.
Yeah, I used to drive one.
Not
yes.
bad at all.
No.
International trucks for $250. Nice. And then one day the von Hindenburg flew over.
Oh, no.
And you could almost hear the cameras rolling, you know.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
We waved, and I got excited. And I thought, well, my God, I'd like to fly one of those one day. But that was a big dirigible. I don't remember the Art.
I surely do, yes. I surely
you and
do.
I can remember that.
Yeah.
You guys can't. But anyway. So then the war broke out, and I immediately dashed off a memo to Ottawa and asked if I could please join the Air Force.
Ah.
And they said, well, you most certainly can. Just be in Halifax on January the 17th, 1940, and see what you could do.
Yeah.
Well, I failed 3 medicals miserably. Well, 2 anyway.
Really?
Well, child of the depression and grossly underweight.
Yeah.
If you could say grossly underweight.
Yes,
but anyway.
right. Oh, yeah.
So I was quickly failing my 3rd medical on June the 17th, 1940, when this LAC dashed into the room and said, "Sir, France has surrendered."
Yeah.
And the president is waving goodbye now. And the doctor took off outside, leaving me standing naked as a jaybird there in the middle of the office. And he came back in, he said, "Well, I guess they can be using you now."
Yeah.
And that was it.
That reduced the number, didn't it,
Yeah.
of the people
God,
they used?
the number. Yeah.
All right. Now, so you enlisted in with the RAF or the RCAF?
The RCAF.
Yes,
Yeah.
and off you went in 1940.
1940.
Okay.
Got on the train that night.
Yes, where'd you go?
They sent us to what was known as the Manning Pool.
Oh, yeah.
at Montreal. I didn't know what a manning pool was, but
Oh,
anyway,
no.
we soon found out it was a place where they had just removed the bulls half an hour before we got there. We were waiting around in it for a while.
Well, oh, yes. Yeah.
And
yeah.
it was quite an experience.
Oh, I
It
bet.
turned out that by the time that particular draft had assembled,
Yeah.
there were 14,000 of us in the what was called the bullpen.
Great Scott.
Yeah, at the
14,000.
Canadian National Exhibition.
Yeah.
Lots of snoring and things going
Oh,
on.
I bet you, yeah.
That was
Now,
quite
you
a-
were in that building, what they call that building, the bullpen, did
Yeah.
they? Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
Because I was over the way in the, what used to be the automotive building, and that was
well,
HMC
you were lucky,
Assured.
yeah. All you had to smell was gas.
Yeah, that's right.
A different kind, but anyway.
Okay, so now you, what did you go into the Air Force? Did you want to be a pilot? Was that?
Well, I think everybody wanted to be a pilot.
course they did,
and
yeah.
to tell you the honest to goodness truth,
Yeah.
that's all we thought was in the Air Force was pilots. There was, after a while, we discovered there were pilots.
Other
all right.
people, yeah.
But it turned out, you see, that during my tender years, I
Yeah.
became a King Scout,
Oh.
and I had a proficiency badge for the Morse code.
Uh-huh.
So I could da-da-da-da it quite
Yes,
well,
yes,
and
yeah.
that sent me ahead by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, yeah.
I found out that it also meant I was going to be a wireless operator.
Operator. Oh, yes.
So
okay,
I, in those days, wireless operators in the British Air Force were not air crew. They were
weren't.
tradesmen,
Oh,
and they only got paid air crew pay when they flew.
Oh,
That's
for
all.
heaven's sake.
But Chubby Power was the Secretary for Air in those days, and he
Yeah.
decided that any Canadian who was going to fly in a bomber
Yeah.
is part of a team. And if you're
Yeah.
going to be a part of a team, then you're all in the same boat together.
Together, and you should be.
And in order to bypass the British restriction, he
Yeah.
sent us all to gunnery school to get our gunnery badges. So then we became air crew,
Yeah.
but we still flew as wireless operators.
Operators, okay.
So we gave the finger to the RAF at that time.
Okay.
Incidentally, when we got to England,
Yeah.
it was still so that the RAF wireless operators were
We're
not
still,
air crew.
weren't air crew.
No. And then when they saw our rates of pay and our
Yeah.
fancy uniforms and beautiful brass buttons and things,
Yeah.
we had an influence on the RAF but they never thanked us for
Yeah.
it. Anyway, all the wireless operators put up air gunnery badges and joined
Yeah.
us as air crew.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And
yeah.
I don't
But of
know.
course, none of this startled you too much. I'm just going to hark back a minute because we swiftly got through your youth, which perhaps we shouldn't have, as you had a very distinguished youth as well, it seems. You were an
Yeah.
Eagles, a King Scout,
Yes.
and did all sorts of things like that.
Oh,
So
this is-
you were in a quasi-military thing when you were young.
Yeah,
Sort of,
more or
yeah.
less. I was in
Yeah.
cadets at high school.
Yeah, cadets at high school.
And what carried broomsticks instead of
Yeah,
rifles,
yeah.
but I was just...
Still, you had a
I was-
smattering in your mind.
I was a
of,
cub master too
yeah.
when I was 17.
Oh my, were you?
And I was president of the Young People's Society in St. Andrew's United Church in those days.
Oh my.
No, I was in the Drama Society, I was in the debating club, and I
Yeah.
had an awful lot of fun.
Yes, you did. You
I
must
sure
have
did.
got very little sleep because you couldn't.
Yeah, they
That's all
told me
you
that
did.
too. My parents had
Spent a lot of
problems
time.
with that. I didn't.
Anyway, back now to the Air Force. You're in the bullpen in Toronto.
Yeah.
And you're taking what, basic training?
We're taking basic training.
March
Probably
up
the
and
most
down.
basic training of all was that in the middle of the night somebody would scream out, "Who's from the West?"
Oh yeah.
And then everybody will say, "Well, that with the West." And somebody say, "Oh, are you from the East?"
Yeah.
And this went on.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that was good. Of the three armed forces, we learned very early
Yeah.
that we were one element, one force. We weren't the Cabreton Highlanders, the Halifax Rifles, the Regina Rifles, and
Oh,
so
I
on.
see. You were one
We
thing.
were
the Air
one
Force.
thing, one Air Force,
Force.
one group, one Canada.
Yeah.
We were the first really united element of Canada.
Of Canada,
Yeah.
right? Yes, yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
Because the Navy had broken up in ships, you
Yes,
became
yeah, you were
loyal to your
separated.
ship and so on,
Yeah.
but it was separated. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Now, you then were trained, you took your basic, and what did they do with you then? You were on your way to being a wireless operator.
At the Manning Depot, we had to learn our left foot from our right foot, or else the other way around. But anyway, we had about 4 days of that. Then we were sent to initial training school, which is where we were introduced to the difference between navigation and flying and machine gunning and all that stuff.
Oh, yes.
And we attended classes more on Air Force policy and procedure than anything else. We also learned how to eat. And this was important. It was considered a bit of a drag to us at the time, but we learned later on the importance of it because we had to learn to eat on a uniform style.
Yes.
Left hand is the fork, right hand is the knife. And you ate your peas on a fork and not on the knife, and so on. And there is a reason for that, because later on during the war, if any of us had been shot down and we were attempting to evade capture, it would be very simple, as it always was, it turned out, to spot an American evading capture in Europe because they ate with their fingers.
Ate with their fingers.
Or right off the plate, one or the other. But we ate the European style.
Yes.
And that concealed our identity.
Oh, very
So this drag that we had to go through at ITS turned out to be a benefit. And we were there 6 weeks, and we graduated in our various aircrew categories. And pilots went to initial training school. Navigators, observers, they were called then, went to Air Observer School, and wireless operators went to Montreal, and the air gunners went to the air gunnery schools at Jarvis and places like that. So when we were at Montreal, we were the 4th class of wireless operators. You hark back to my bit about the signalers. And so, but to distinguish us from the wireless operators who were technicians, rather than aircrew wireless operators, they made us wear little white patches in our forage caps. And this set us out, you know, like we had, like...
People said, what's wrong with him?
What's that? So the ground crew took advantage of this because being air crew, but not having any badges other than that, we became sort of popular downtown. So the ground crew said, well, don't, you know, be careful of those guys with the white pigs because they've got a strange little disease. So what are we going to do now? Pardon me. So we said, well, the only answer to that is that we don't have a strange little disease at all. We were inoculated against a strange little disease. And if you want to play games with us, like nice little girls around town, well, you will not have that disease either. So that was our social life in Montreal. Other than being the very, very nice people of Montreal, inviting us out to their homes. And guests at parties and movies and garden parties and things like that. No, we were very well
Montreal
received.
was wonderful for that.
Oh, we used to say, well, I know, you know, Montreal is a vast place. And in those days we'd say, well, but the Maritimes are pretty half vast.
I'll tell you a story about Billy Bishop just before we go on. Because I'm going to swap a story with you now.
Billy Bishop?
Billy Bishop. I was doing the Victory Loan shows there. And he invited us to his house. And when we went up the steps, and when he had a big house, Mount Royal, big house, and when we went in, we had a couple of movie stars with us. Greer Garson, I think, was one, and some other lady. And he said, ladies, just a moment, we have to take off our boots here. It was a vast porch, and with a cupboard, I think, in it or something. But then he went up to the wall, and the wall had wallpaper on it, and he put out his hand like this, and I thought, what is the dear man doing? And there was a handle I didn't notice on the wall. He opened it like that, and it was full of drinks. It was a refrigerator in the wall with the drinks already. And he said, what will you have? And we're in the porch. We're not in the house yet. Anyway, he did things very well for us.
That's all right.
Anyway, so that's Montreal.
We had a beautiful, Montreal. They shot us off then to the gunnery school. Remember, we had to be air crew.
Oh, of course you did.
So it was just coming on Christmas, And we arrived at Jarvis, and my George, they just barely got the tar paper on the roofs of the houses. It was still being built. And the heating system, snap, crackle, bang, you know.
Yes.
And the kitchen wasn't ready yet, so there's no food. We all went in for a shower, there's no water.
No water.
So off we, well, anyway, they had an awful time with us there.
Yeah.
But we eventually got through. We were flying the ferry battles.
Oh,
this
yes.
was an open cockpit,
Ferry battles,
fighter-looking airplane with a gun turret in the back.
Oh, yeah.
And they had just then sort of rescued these from Dunkirk, I guess.
Yeah.
And here we are flying at Jarvis, Ontario, on these things. And it was kind of tricky being a gunner because the gun was mounted on a little pole.
Yeah.
And it was what we call a gas-operated gun, a pop, 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 pop
Yes.
gun.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And we had to somehow or other make sure that we weren't going to fall out of that airplane.
Yeah.
And what we had was a cincture strap that went from a hook in the back of your parachute harness
Yes.
down to the floor. And believe it or not, we often wound up hanging on that damn thing upside down.
Oh, no, really? Oh, my gosh.
Because the pilots were having fun. They were bored to death.
Yeah.
They joined the war too, you see. But
Yes.
what are they doing? Flying air gunner trainees
Trainees
around. Oh, the
around.
heck with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So they would do a flip and a roll, and there we are.
Are hanging.
Well, we got through that.
Oh, yeah.
And
Now, you're a gunner as well as a
wireless
operator.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we were gunners only to allow wireless operators to be air crew.
Crew, I understand.
That's the way that
yes,
was.
Yeah.
And we had a vicious winter there at Jarvis. It was terrible. We were there shortly when we were invited to a fraternity at some Ridley College, a private school.
Yes, indeed.
It was very nice,
Yeah.
and they were very nice to us.
Yes.
And they had our girlfriends all waiting for us when we got there.
Got there, yeah. I don't know.
And I fell madly in love with one of these girls who
Yeah.
turns out her parents invited us for Christmas dinner, invited me
yeah.
for Christmas dinner.
That was-
He turned out to be the Crown Attorney for the county anyway, but mind you, I was a young, innocent
yes.
youth.
Youth at
I
that
have to
time.
make
Very
that,
innocent, yes.
establish that.
In the Sydney youth.
And here we go. We start off with sherry, and then we have every item of food on that Christmas table was totally laced with booze. And we got down to the ice cream part, which was really creme de menthe.
Yeah.
And I slid quietly off my chair under the table.
I don't wonder.
I woke up being nursed by the girl's mother and the father, who, mind you, is the Crown Attorney, is going to drive me back to base
Oh, yeah.
on Christmas afternoon. And he's not very happy. You know, I make a mess of the whole show. Anyway, on the way back, his daughter's with us, and he gives us both a lecture that there's a war on. And I'm going overseas, and it's not very nice, and I don't think that we should carry on with this romance, and so on and so. We said fond goodbyes, but we did write letters back and forth until I ended up with a wife in England, and that was it.
Anyway, now you get through Montreal, and you're trained.
Yeah.
And where do you go from there?
Well, the gunnery school at Jarvis.
Jarvis,
From
right.
Jarvis, we have to report to Pier 21
Oh, yeah.
in Halifax.
Yeah.
But we have 10 days embarkation leave. So I went home to Sydney, and we had these sometimes teary farewells.
Yes,
Sometimes some of us were half in the bag.
Yeah.
But what we felt sorry for was when we got to Halifax,
Yeah.
there's this huge ocean liner sitting there,
Yeah.
the Johan van Olden Barneveld, which is a Dutch Pacific and Orient liner from the Pacific Ocean. And they tootled it through the canal and up into Halifax, where it was going to be refitted and become a troop ship for the North Atlantic, which is not at all the South Pacific.
No, it is not. And no ships that built for
we were
one
quite
ship.
amazed. They had these Filipinos on board with the sarongs and white teeth.
Good heavens.
And bandanas and bare feet.
Oh, my.
And in the middle of January, we didn't think much of that. We gave them all our greatcoats, which we had to pay for later. But anyway.
Yes, later. You wanted them back.
Well, we couldn't get on the ship because they are still having to replace the jalousies with windows, and a jalousie is the where air-conditioned window sort of thing. So they sent us up to Burt, but we ran into this Jarvis situation all over again. The Burt was not at all half complete even, and it was all muddy streets. And in the middle of January in Nova Scotia, of course, it's raining one minute and snowing the next, and then it freezes in between. And as we got out of this open stake body truck to walk from the truck to the barracks, we sunk up to our ankles in mud through thin ice. And once again, a snap, crackle, pop inside. So they said, well, this is too bad. I think everybody's going to go to Truro. So they took us all back into Truro, where they did a roaring business that night. And we stayed there for 3 nights, and they traipsed us back to Burt. And then they said, well, the ship is ready. So we just, without even unpacking, sent us back to Halifax. And they could have sent us.
And got aboard this ship with the name
we got
as long
aboard
as
the ship, and there we go. The Duchess of Bedford's up front, the Johann van Olden Barneveldt is in the back, and away we go.
There you go. And where do you land?
We landed in a place called Gurrock, Scotland, where they don't speak English. I don't know what they speak, but I know when we arrived, when we arrived there, we were put on a paddle wheel ferry, you know, flop, 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 and we came up to the pier head, or whatever that was, and climbed a Jacob's ladder, and that's a trick to do with leather gloves and a pack on your back. And there's the train waiting for us. And here are all the railway staff with their hand out looking for écrous. Écrous. We didn't know what an écrous was, so we just bypassed them and let it go at that. But it turned out later they were looking for half crowns, which is about 50 cents.
So now they were putting you aboard the train.
They put us aboard the train off to London, and we had a couple of short stops, one at Manchester and a couple of other, Shrewsbury, I think, because there were no toilets on the train. No. But I think lots of windows were open on the way anyway, so it didn't matter much. So it was a short trip from Gurrock to Uxbridge, which is in London. And we were just checking into Uxbridge when this Air Commodore arrived. A Royal Air Force Air Commodore.
Very
and he
serious
had with him
fellow.
a double-decker bus.
Did he?
Oh my God, And turns out he's a Canadian.
Really?
So this is great. And he takes us on the double-decker bus out to Windsor Castle. And there's a scenic tour en route. There's somebody there explaining it to us, and it was very good. And we're wandering around the maze at Windsor Castle, which is really quite something.
Yes, it is.
And all of a sudden, two little corgi dogs came out in front of us, and we knew right away what they were because you saw it on the news all the time, you know, movie tone news. And so we thought, well, where they are, we have to be careful. And sure enough, who turns up with 2 little princesses? And with that, the Air Commodore snaps and breaks his ankles, coming to attention, salutes. And the Princess Elizabeth bowed, you know. I thought, well, how does she know enough to do that? But she sure did.
She did.
I think she was only 12 at the time. And then came the lady in waiting. And she was quite surprised to see us. They didn't know we were there. She asked us to please wait, that the Queen probably would like to meet the Canadians, because they just had returned from Canada a couple of years before that, if you recall. So sure enough, the Queen invited us in, and we had tea. But the King wasn't there, but the Queen was.
No, he was very sick at that point, I guess.
Right. And I found out later he had surgery at that time.
Did he?
Not many people knew that he had a cancer operation. So anyway, we were looked after very nicely. And the remarkable thing about it is that we were made to feel at home.
Isn't that nice?
It wasn't as if we were in the presence of the Queen at all. Some of us could hardly believe it.
I know.
And that was our short experience. From there we
Yeah.
went to British operational training
Yeah.
units. I was sent to a place called Upper Hayford.
Yeah.
And
Now, somewhere along the line, you jumped ship into another Air Force altogether.
another which?
Air Force. Australian, I think.
Australian.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, that was after my first tour.
Oh, was it? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm getting way ahead of us then. Go
No,
ahead.
okay.
Keep
So anyway, Upper Hayford, they found out we were totally ignorant about how to talk.
Oh.
The vocabulary in the Royal Air Force was not
Yeah.
at all the Canadian
Canadian,
vocabulary.
yeah.
We talked about radios, they talked about wireless.
Wireless.
We talked
Ah,
about
right.
radio tubes, they talked about valves.
Oh,
And so we had to have a course in that. So they shot us off to Cranwell, Royal Air
Yeah.
Force College, Cranwell,
just to learn the language.
just to learn the language.
I thought that was a surprise to you. You thought you could speak
Yeah,
almost
it
anything.
sure was. And
Yeah.
there was more to it than
Yeah.
that. Because we had what became known as the Great Cranwell Revolt.
Oh.
When we arrived at Cranwell, we were sloughed off from the
Yeah.
base off into the woods,
Yeah.
into tar paper shacks up on stilts.
Mm-hmm.
And when we complained about that, we had no heat. You could look down through the cracks in the floor
Yeah.
at the ground. And outdoor lavatories.
Yeah.
And it was really shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And mind, this is still in January 41.
Wow.
So we complained about it, and they sent a British Air Vice Marshal up from London who told us in blunt terms that he knew how to handle colonials.
Oh.
So we said, okay, you just try
Yeah, you're
handling
colonial.
us. And we went back to the barracks. We took out every stick of furniture
Yeah.
and set it on fire. And while it's still burning,
Yeah.
4 of us go down to London, overseas headquarters,
Yeah.
and report the state of affairs at Cranwell.
Uh-huh.
It turns out that the commanding officer of the overseas headquarters at that time was an Air Vice Marshal
Yeah.
Edwards.
Yeah.
Air Vice Marshal Edwards came from Glace Bay, something that I did
Oh,
not
my
know.
goodness.
But he knew my father,
Oh, yeah.
and he was surprised to see me, but
Yeah.
we didn't let on this relationship at all.
Yeah.
And he just heard our story and called for a squadron leader whose name was also Edwards. So Edwards and a Flight Sergeant Patterson came back
Yeah.
to Cranwell, and that was the first RCAF detachment overseas.
Oh, my
That was the
goodness.
precursor to what had become later 6th Group.
Group, yes. Yes.
And so we set the RAF straight a little bit on that,
Oh,
because
that was
they,
good.
they then posted us out, but very
Gingerly.
cleverly made sure that only
Yes.
one of us at a time went from
Oh,
here to there.
here's there.
No, true, that would be a
Guilty,
mutiny.
Yeah.
So I went to Bassingbourne, OTU, and up in Hertfordshire.
Yes.
And the second day, we were in class listening to a Creed machine on Morse code,
Oh, yeah.
which they would advance. The more you heard, the faster it got.
Got. Oh, yeah.
And the commanding officer of the training wing came in one day and asked for me, a squadron leader, and here am I, a little rookie sergeant, and asked for me. So I stood up, my knees turned to jelly. I didn't know what I had done. So he called me out to his office. Here's my logbook sitting on his desk. And he said, you see that aircraft over there, pointing to a Wellington bomber
Yeah.
out in the airfield? And he said, that's yours. You get out there right now. You just graduated. Oh, good heavens to Elizabeth. So anyway, he takes my log and he writes in it, above average,
Yeah.
that's it, go.
Oh.
So I had no gear. I had no parachute, no nothing, no
Oh,
logbook or anything.
Yeah.
So he called for a flight sergeant. I got kitted out immediately.
Yeah.
Went out in the aircraft, and here's this poor little guy sitting on the wireless set. He didn't know it from beans.
Yeah.
And he says, are you the wireless operator?
Yeah.
I said, yes, I am. He said, well, thank God for that. He got up and went up and into the front turret. And that night,
Yeah.
we were on operations,
Just like that.
just like that.
Holy
We flew to Brest. We had another word for it, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
And the next night we flew to Le Havre,
Mm.
And those were channel ports being used by the Germans for submarine bases. I don't think we ever damaged it during the war because that's all they ever sent there were these frogs from OTU.
How did you feel about that? Can you remember back the feeling then?
Yes, I had a terrible feeling about that. I didn't feel good about it, but I thought, well, after all, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, but I would have thought in your shoes, well gosh, I need a little more time here to get my feet.
Well, that occurred to me, but I thought also I wouldn't be going if they didn't think I could.
No, that's true.
Because there are 6 other guys in that airplane,
Right, sure,
and I have to fit in with the team,
Yeah,
and I have to be up to their snuff, not
Yeah,
mine.
yeah.
So we went. We had an exciting night.
Night,
Bang,
yeah,
bang, crash, crash,
yeah.
and so on. But we had a safe trip. We came back, no flak holes. No
And the
nothing
next
like that.
night you felt
The second trip was the one that I really worried about,
Really, yeah.
because I saw what was going to happen. Anyway, we got back and we had our posting, and then I went to 103 Squadron, which became a very, very famous squadron. There's a little story about that. Can I tell you?
Surely,
Okay.
surely, please.
We arrived in 103 Squadron in early May of 1941, and the news came across. We suddenly had to go to the briefing room immediately. We couldn't wait. So down we go to the briefing room, and they had maps, charts, and everything else. And there's 3 ships: the Prince Eugen, the Scharnhorst, and the Gneisenau.
Gneisenau, yes.
And they were sailing off up the channel through the North Sea, going to escape into the Atlantic and bother our convoys. And they were doing this because there was about a 300-foot blanket of fog, and they thought they were going to
Get away
on that.
Yes, because
What they didn't know was that the heat from the smokestacks separated the fog.
Oh.
So we went out.
So
and
as they sailed, they separated the fog.
Yeah, and there's 3 beautiful open lanes of water,
Yeah.
under which you knew right away, dead ahead, was a ship.
Sure.
So Gordy Lappin was our front gunner, and he said, well, I'll keep an eye out. If I fire my guns, that means the bomb aimer drops his bombs immediately, and the rear gunner will strafe as we go by.
Yes. Okay.
So that's the setup.
Yeah.
Well, on one of these aircraft was a British rear gunner by the name of Johnny Holmes. And Johnny Holmes had a buckle-jost hammer.
Just like his gun.
Yeah, my God, staccato beat.
Yeah.
But you have to remember now that King George VI also had a stammer.
Yes, he did.
And George VI used to keep a tea shot,
Yeah.
and big gobs of foam would gather. But anyway, Johnny, when he strafed, something happened. Kaboom! The whole sky lit up, and whatever happened damaged one of those ships, and they sailed into a Norwegian fjord where they stayed for the rest of the war.
Right.
But this was Johnny who did it.
Did it?
So Johnny got an immediate award of the Distinguished Flying Medal.
Did he?
Now, if you look at this,
Yes.
this is the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Cross there. Yes.
See, the stripes go from upper right to
Right.
bottom
down.
left.
Yes. Right.
If you put that ribbon on inside out, it'll
Yeah.
go from upper left to
left
bottom
down
right.
to the bottom. Yeah.
Which, what do you think Johnny Holmes did when he sewed on his own medal,
He put it
his
on
own
upside
ribbon?
down.
He put it on backwards. Then he goes down to Buckingham Palace to get his medal.
Yeah.
And we're all excited about this because that's the first medal in the squadron in the war.
Yes.
So, well, great. We're all anxious for Johnny to come home, and he came home.
Yeah.
What was it like, Johnny? Terrible. Why? What happened? I had my bloody ribbon on wrong. Oh? What did the king say? He gave me hell. Well, what did you say? You don't think I was going to open my mouth at a time like that? Anyway, that was the start of 103.
Yeah.
When I was with 103 Squadron, I was shot down twice.
Yes.
Now, when we say shot down, Austin, we don't mean we're going down in flames and,
No, I
horrible
understand.
mess
Yes,
at the bottom.
Yeah.
You're shot down if you are not in control of the aircraft.
Huh.
And that's technically what we were not,
Not,
in control
yes,
of
sure.
the aircraft.
Yeah.
And we landed away from base with heavy damage.
Which means you were surely shot down.
Yeah, definitely, and a
Yeah.
couple of wounded
Yeah.
air crew on board,
Yeah.
and others very highly nervous.
Yeah.
But after, in those days, we flew by time, and because the Wellington was all out, you could do 120 knots.
Yeah.
So you couldn't go too far.
No.
So a tour was 100 hours.
Oh, a tour was 100 hours,
Yeah.
however it came. Yeah.
That's right. So after we got the 100 hours, we were sent back to training command to train Sprogs on OTU.
In other words, you became an instructor.
I became an instructor.
Right.
Now, the intriguing thing is that when our crew, and another one, Chris Hare from Toronto, his crew as well,
Yeah.
they didn't send us to OTU. We sent to the Royal Australian Air Force brand new squadron.
Right. My goodness.
The Aussies, having become aware of our problem at Cranwell, decided that they were going to bypass the RAF altogether.
Oh.
And being bloody-minded and very independent,
I
as
know that,
all
yeah.
Australians are,
Yeah.
they decided that they would form their squadron and let the training command come to them.
Them. Oh.
And that was us.
Yeah.
So we trained the squadron. What we did was,
Yeah.
there's 6 of us in each crew, so that's 12 of us.
Mhm.
So we would take 12 crews out for 5 trips. And that would be it. If they can't learn in 5 trips,
Then. Yeah.
well, anyway. Then we recrewed, and we stayed with the squadron.
Oh.
And that was
That was
exciting,
kinda
too.
neat, wasn't it? Yeah. But
Australians
get
are
on
always
well with
exciting.
them? You got on well with them, though.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, very,
great
very
guys,
much
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I got my flight sergeant's badge while I was there.
Did you? Yeah.
And the day I got it, the
Yeah.
Australian wing commander, his name was Bill Mulholland,
Yeah.
and he had a glass eye.
Yeah.
And I think it had a riveting factor to it, because every time you looked at him, that's all you could see. And he said, I want to thank you two boys, this is Chris Hare and myself,
Yeah.
for helping me out with the squadron. And he says, I'm recommending you for a commission.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
God. And so, this was in October
Yeah.
41, yeah. And so we went up to Botry Hall, which was the group headquarters,
Yeah.
and interviewed by Lord Oxland, who was an Air Vice Marshal.
Yeah.
No, Air Marshal.
Air
Ooh,
Marshal.
Yes. And sitting with
He
him,
interviewed prospective
we
commission
were interviewed to be qualified for our commission.
for a commission.
Well, Chris went in first, letter H, went in first, and he came out, and he was just totally smiling from ear to ear. I didn't know he had so many teeth.
Yeah.
And I said, what's up?
Yeah.
And he says, they asked me the British question.
Yeah.
What is it? He says, what does your father do?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I said, oh, God.
Yeah.
Anyway, what did you say? He said, well, no, Chris's father was a gas victim from the First World War, and he wasn't very well off.
Yeah.
He said, well, I told him my father was a brain surgeon. Okay. What the hell am I going to say? Because I'm brought up in the Depression era.
Yeah.
My father had been a salesman,
Yeah.
and we lost our home and everything else, and you know,
Yeah.
I'm thin and all
Yeah.
that. Anyway, I'm in there, and sure enough, we're sitting down, all sorts of questions. There's a technician there, a sergeant major, who's going to check me out on my wireless.
Oh,
And he
yeah.
asked, he says, what's the square root of .99?
Oh.
Point,
99.
.99.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did have the answer.
Yeah.
I thought, well, .99 is pretty bloody close to 1.
Close to
so
1,
I
yeah.
said, well, it's almost 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then came the British question. What does your father do? I said, my father is a banana peddler, sir, and I'm his organ grinder. Anyway, later on, we go back to the sergeant's mess, and here's the sergeant major who had been on the sitting on the table there.
Yeah.
He says, the Air Marshal was very impressed with your creativity.
Oh.
He says, do you know that he had your records in front of him anyway? Lord God. But we did get our commissions. In
Oh,
the
you
end.
did. Yeah.
After that came Pearl Harbor.
Oh.
And here we were on a squadron of Australians
Oh, my God.
and New Zealanders.
Yeah.
And Pearl Harbor is right next, it's the
Next door.
Japanese.
Yeah,
And they're
of course.
having fun.
Yeah.
So these Aussies want to go home.
Right away.
And I told you they're pretty bloody minded,
Yeah.
so they made a big point of it. So the British knuckled under and said, well, I'll tell you what, fellas,
Yeah.
it's not safe for you to be home, but we'll send you to the desert. We need you. We need Air Force in the desert.
Oh.
Now, this is just at the time of Yalta. And
yeah.
Stalin and Churchill and
Yeah,
Roosevelt are
yeah.
all there.
Yeah.
And Stalin made his demands. He said, you better open up a second front, because
Yeah.
if you don't, I'm going to surrender Stalingrad,
Right.
flee into Siberia,
yes,
and the
yeah.
Germans will come down around and block off the Mediterranean Sea,
And
and
it's
there goes India and Burma and all those
goodbye,
other
Charlie.
places. And
Yeah,
also there
yeah.
goes Australia and New Zealand.
New Zealand, sure.
Well, so out to the desert we went,
Did you? By
First-
way of Malta.
by way of Malta.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. Well, first of all, we were at Gibraltar and we saw the Barbary apes, and we
Did
thought
you?
that was fun.
Yeah.
We thought they looked more intelligent than the British Army.
Army.
But anyway, away we go,
Yeah.
leave early in the morning. From the time that we landed at Gibraltar until the
Yeah.
morning, they took in the HMS Hood, which is as big as the Empire State Building,
exactly.
and it's sitting right at the end of the runway.
Yeah.
And the
Oh.
runway is only 700 feet long. And we're 1,760 pounds overloaded on a twin-engine bomber.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, it's all geared up, and we have the ground crew are holding onto the chocks under the wheels, and at the
Yeah.
sign of the signal, they pull the chocks, and away we go.
Away you go.
Well, we just got on the...
Just got over the hood.
I hate to think of the mess on the decks of that warship, but anyway.
Yeah.
Off to Malta we went, stripping as we go, because it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter.
Yeah.
The Mediterranean is a warm place.
Yeah.
Come nighttime, the gunner tells us they're having activity over Malta.
Oh.
Mind you, we have to have wireless silence because we're flying through enemy
Yes,
territory.
yes, yeah.
And they're having a raid at Malta. Well, we knew they were having raids now and again,
Yeah.
but we didn't expect to run into this particular one. And it was definitely a fierce battle.
Yeah.
So there were no lights to land by.
Oh.
They had warned us not
Yeah.
to land at Pantelleria, which was an Italian island,
Oh, yeah.
exactly like Malta.
Malta,
And
yeah.
the Italian Air Force was flying out of Pantelleria. So we had to make sure that the one we were aimed at was Malta.
Oh.
And we knew pretty well it was because of
Yeah.
the activity that was
yeah.
taking place. So we went around and we finally figured out that we knew where the runway was, and we went. Well, the bombs are dropping all around us. The flak is fligging all upstairs. It's quite a bit.
Yeah.
And when we stopped, there was this little, like a Cherokee Jeep sort of thing.
Yes, yeah.
And it's got very dim lighting behind it,
Yeah.
fully shadowed, and says, "Follow me." So we followed him.
Yeah.
My God, he parked us right beside a gas tank.
Oh.
Anyway, pilot says, "Let's get out of here quick."
Yes.
So out we go. I'm up front first. That was my
Yeah.
job anyway.
Yeah.
Open the trap door, and this face is peering up at me.
Yeah.
Stark terror.
Yeah.
And a foreign accent. And a foreign uniform and
Oh.
metallic badges all over, and I closed the deck door. I said, I said, the Germans got here half an hour ago.
Yeah.
Pilot said, "Oh my God, here we go, Wiener Schnitzel for breakfast." But when we got out, it was a Polish Air Force pilot in the Free Polish Air Force
Yes.
pilot in the British Air Force.
Yeah.
And what had happened was that his airplane had been blown up.
Oh.
So he was waiting for us to come in.
Yeah.
Well, there was by morning, there were quite a number of crews waiting for the next airplane to come in so they could fly out.
Oh.
And we were there for 3 weeks, during which
3
time they
weeks.
had what was known as the Great Siege of Malta.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's
And
one
you
of these,
got
this
that
medal here.
Second one in.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And that siege, there was never a moment, not one moment when there wasn't 100 bombers or fighters
Overhead.
overhead.
Gosh.
And
Yeah.
that was a
Yeah.
terrifying
I know.
experience. All we had to eat was grass and mulberry leaves. That's for 10 days.
Yeah.
And of course, I got malaria from that.
Yeah.
But anyway, came the great day when it was our turn to fly out.
Yeah.
And we flew to Egypt. Pardon me. My mind went back to Sunday school days when we had one of these little Sunday school lessons about a plane flying around Africa.
Yeah.
And I was amused by that. People wondering why I was smiling getting off the airplane at Cairo. Nobody else smiled at all because the German army was only 51 miles. You could hear the cannon firing from where we were. But one day we were told to get out and recce the Mediterranean, the supply route. And there must have been 20, I suppose, tankers low in the water, just loaded with gas.
Yeah.
And they were Italian ships.
Yeah.
And they were sailing into Benzarta. No, Benghazi, I'm sorry.
Benghazi. This is for Rommel, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And we spotted this, so we immediately went back to base and said we needed torpedoes. And there were no torpedoes. Well, we want bombs. Well, this is an advanced base. We got no bombs. Well, what the hell have we got? Well, we have millions of sandbags, and we got gross millions of tons of sand.
Yeah.
So we stuffed these sandbags full of sand up into the bomb bay, took off, went up, sailed up,
Oh, no.
back and forth in front of the convoy, dropping sandbags into the Med.
Oh,
the
my
convoy
God.
shifted and sailed 400 miles further east to Tobruk.
Oh, my.
So whatever was going to take place
Didn't.
didn't.
Yeah.
And there were the German Navy assiduously looking for these sea mines. I couldn't find any.
Yeah.
They called us the Benghazi miners after that. Which
Now,
I thought,
now you are commissioned now.
Yeah, no, not yet.
Not yet.
I didn't hear about it. I was, but I didn't know about it. So we're there. Another time we were on a mission.
Yeah.
And I got the message, being the wireless operator, to get back immediately and return to main base. So we came down, zipped down, picked up our handbags, and away we had this oceans of beer, Australian beer. And we left it on the table, set up the bar, some half empty, some half full. And it made it look like we were having a party before we left, but we weren't. We just came back from flying. They had these mats over the sand, were coiled rope mats.
Yes.
Yeah. So we put a landmine in under the mat.
Yeah.
And strung wires out to the urinal just outside the tent, which was a 10-gallon petrol tin.
Yeah.
And we knew that after so much beer, there'd be so much stuff. So we put the wires such as level.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I bet you we weren't 100 miles away when kaboom went the tent. And we heard later, we wiped out about half the general staff. That was fun. Shortly after that, they sent us, we were supposed to go home.
Yeah.
To England, but they couldn't do it because of the activity in the Mediterranean at the time. So Pan American came in, landed at Heliopolis Airport, where the Sphinx and pyramids and things are. And they flew us down to Lagos, Nigeria, where we spent the whole summer of 1942. And that was fun.
It was a hot summer.
Yeah, and the pyramids and the Sphinx.
Yeah.
It was just like what we saw in our geography books back home in school, but it didn't smell quite the same. No, altogether different.
Yeah.
When we went down, the first place we landed at was a place known as Khartoum.
Khartoum,
famous for the
very famous
General Gordon and the Mad Mullah and so on. And then across to a place called El Fasher.
Fasher, that's famous too.
Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah.
And then across to Kano. Kano was reputed to be the historic home of the Queen of Sheba.
Oh my
And I think it's exactly the same place as it was.
Yeah.
It was all mud huts, mud city walls were about 20 feet thick, but it was all mud clay. And
But this is great fun to see all this.
oh, my Lord, yeah. But it was interesting, too, because the natives who were working in the mess at the time where we were supposed to eat and sleep, they didn't wear one stitch of clothing. Oh, gosh. Quite a culture shock to some of us.
Oh, my.
Especially when they're serving you bacon and eggs, you know, my God. But we got out of there anyway and back out. And then we flew down to Maiduguri.
Yeah.
And from Maiduguri down to Lagos, where we spent a very pleasant 6 weeks where nobody knew anything about us or where we were, even those of us who were there. And it was quite interesting because one time the governor invited us out to a party where we were introduced to a lady called Eva Curie.
Oh.
And she was the daughter of Madame Pierre and Marie Curie.
Goodness.
And Eva had all the secrets in her little kit bag, and she was trying to get them to New York.
Oh.
And we became her security escort at Lagos.
Oh, that was fun.
And so a plane came across and picked her up and waved goodbye to her. And she took back and she wrote a book on that called Journey Among Warriors.
Warriors,
And I know very well we contributed to the excitement at Lagos.
Now, when did you get out of there and get back home?
When we had to wait for a ship.
Yeah.
And in came a brand new flat top.
Oh.
Now, this is distinguished from an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Inasmuch as it was a Liberty boat built by Kaiser.
Oh.
And the Liberty ships, and they just put a deck on it without any smokestacks or anything.
Oh.
And we got on that. We were just opposite Freetown, Sierra Leone, when I was called up to the captain's bridge, and I was told, we have to go and join a convoy for a battle. There's going to be a battle.
Yeah.
So I have to let you off here now at Freetown. So he sailed in and let us off.
Yeah.
And we had a mad time there for 3 days with gin at 80 cents a quart. And anyway, we forgot our troubles. Yeah. And then we were picked up by the Donatar Castle, HMT, His Majesty's Transport Donatar Castle. And it was an ocean liner.
Yeah.
But converted to troop duty, and we went to Scotland and on that. I reported into London Overseas Headquarters, and here I am wearing a New Zealand Air Force cap, a Sailor Square Rig jacket, Royal Australian Air Force trousers, and British Army socks and shoes. The reason for that was we had had a great fire up the time that we were up in Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
And we lost everything there, but we scrounged around and got enough to look decent, and that was
So what do they do with you now?
Well, I had to prove who I was.
I bet you did.
And I said, my name is Jimmy Lovelace, and I come from Sydney, Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you're missing. I said, well, I don't doubt it, but here you're looking at me now.
Yeah.
So I had to give my mother's maiden name and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then they took my fingerprints, and it matched with the ones they had. So that's great. They said, well, you have been commissioned for the last year.
Oh,
yeah. So I trotted off to Austin Reed's of Regent Street.
And got fitted out.
And got suited out. And then I was sent to rejoin my squadron.
Yeah.
When I got there, I got the message that the British system is, if you're commissioned, you have to leave all your former friends behind.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And
not even speak to them, maybe.
That's right. Yeah, this is terrible.
Yeah.
So anyway, they sent me to 150 Squadron Royal Air Force, and we did 13 trips with them, and I crashed twice with them as well.
No, did you?
The last crash is the one I got my DFC on. And it was only the pilot and I who managed to survive that
one. Oh, what was that one particularly?
That was a trip on Frankfurt.
Oh. Were you in Wellingtons then? Wellingtons?
Wellington bombers. All my trips were Wellington bombers.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the Wellingtons, I just wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Right.
But this was on Frankfurt. We had, the war is getting more technical.
Yes,
everything is getting quicker and faster and higher and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we devised a scheme.
Everybody was getting it right at the right time.
Oh,
at the
my
same
God.
time. Yeah.
Everything was getting
Yeah.
really scary, as they used to say. And so we devised, so all the bombers are at a certain altitude.
Yeah.
You're always told what altitude.
Yeah.
It's dependent on the target and the weather. So we figured, well, as we're getting, if we can see the target, we're going to drop
Yeah.
and let those guys, because that's where the flak's going to be.
Sure, yeah.
See? Thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's right. And we'd always drop down and drop behind. So the war is half over by the time
You
we
get
get to
there.
the target.
Surely, yes, yeah.
And so when we get there, the thing then is to come down quickly,
Yeah.
drop your bombs
Bombs and then
scoot.
veer off. Yeah.
And we did it
Yeah.
9 times without
Right.
an incident.
Yeah.
But
This
this
time.
one night,
Yeah.
kapow! Wow!
Oh.
There we are. The right aileron is shot off, but it's not shot off. It's hanging down.
Oh.
The left engine is shot out. It's on fire.
Oh.
The tail,
Yeah.
on the empennage, there's a fin at the back,
Yes,
to which
yeah.
the rudder is attached.
Yes. Yeah.
That is opened up, so the rudder doesn't work.
Oh my.
The wheels fell down, so the hydraulics are not good. And so we're in a desperate situation.
Desperate.
And the aircraft dropped from 12,000 feet to 2,000 feet before the pilot was able to regain any control at all.
Oh my God.
And he only did that by manipulating the trim.
Yeah.
Now the trim is a tiny little thing on each control area. And by manipulating that, he was able to slowly
Correct
correct it. But we never ever at any time were able to climb. And we were flying up the Ruhr Valley, and the aircraft guns were shooting down on us.
Oh.
And we knew that somewhere in there's going to be a hill. So we had resigned ourselves to death, and that was it.
Yeah.
But since you're still able to do it, do it.
Do it, surely.
And at one point I got a message saying, avoid the Reims Cathedral, it will be coming up on your left. And sure enough, there's the Reims Cathedral, looking at it dead on.
Oh.
That's how low we were, and our airspeed was as low as 90 miles an hour. This battle went on for 4 hours and 17 minutes, constantly being fired on. When we came out Cape Grenez in France, we dropped off the cliff and actually hit the water, but the pilot was able to just keep out of the water.
Yeah.
And when we arrived coming close to England with all these SOS procedures and everything else that I was using, they had the searchlights ready for us at the emergency strip at Lympne Airport. Lympne is spelled L-Y-M-P-N-E, but anyway, so that's the British spelling. So we were headed for the searchlights when all of a sudden there was this huge tree in front of us. That was it. And we were a flaming mess.
Oh my. And what did you get done to you?
I had a fracture of what I discovered. I never knew before in my life that was called the zygomatic arch. I know it is now.
And you had that all.
And I had that broken, and I had my right hip fractured, the hairline fracture on the hip. And the front gunner, during all this routine, he came out of his front turret because of the total terror up there. I wanted him to sit on the cabin floor where I was with his back to the door. So that if we crashed or when we crashed, he would have some support for his back. But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to go up into the navigator's astrodome and see what was happening. Well, in there were 2 ropes that hung down. So when the navigator was taking a star shot, he could hang on those ropes. He put his ropes through there, and when we crashed, that's where he left his arms. And when we were trying to get out, my head was stuck between the wireless set and the side of the fuselage, and I had to pull those apart to get out. And that's when I did the damage. And I got up front, and the second pilot seemed to be unconscious.
Yeah.
And the captain was struggling, trying to get out,
Yeah.
when I discovered he didn't undo his belt.
Oh.
So I undid his belt, and he popped out like a banana through the bunch. He fell, and he disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, I knew he'd disappear all right, but I didn't know quite where.
Yeah.
As it turned out, we were 20 feet up in the air, and he fell that 20 feet butt down through the tree that we were in.
Right.
And then I reached for the second pilot, and he was out cold, so I pushed him out and let him fall. Then I got out. And
Now, where were?
so I pushed him out and let him fall. Then I got out. And
Now, where were you?
we were at near the airport at Lim,
Lynn.
down at a place called Herne Bay, on the Thames River estuary, which was quite close to a hospital.
Yes, very. I was going to say you'd be close to help.
But when I got down, we both, the pilot and I, attended to the second pilot. The navigator was gone, the front gunner was gone, the rear gunner was gone, and there was just the two pilots and myself.
Left.
Yeah, and then the second pilot started to throw up.
Oh.
And he was throwing up cold water, ice cold water.
Oh my.
So we both knew from having been briefed that
Yeah.
he was dying from shock.
Oh, is
And
that?
he died in my arms. As a
Good
matter of
heavens.
fact, I was quite shook up by that.
Yeah, I bet you are. Oh my.
Because I was having trouble myself. I was a mess of
I
blood.
would think so. Yeah.
And the pilot was weeping and crying, like which I don't blame at all. He was in hysteria, really.
Yeah.
And the second pilot, just as he was dying, took my hand
Yeah.
and put it in his breast pocket and pulled out his rosary and gave it to me, and that's been with me ever since.
Yeah,
And I don't use the rosary,
but
I have it. And then the most infuriating thing happened. This policeman came along on a bicycle.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Took out his notebook.
And said.
Wanted to have our name, rank, and number, and what's going on here. And here's the airplane completely ablaze, and people are dead in there. And he does this trick.
Yeah.
And then when he heard the ambulance coming, gets on his bike and pedals off, leaves us. I was in the hospital 40 days.
Yeah.
But during that time, the sergeant major, who had been on the commissioning board, came down and told me in the hospital that I had been recommended for the DFC.
Oh my, that was.
And that was really, I thought for him to do that,
Yeah.
you know. So he told me that, and I recovered
Yeah.
and rejoined the squadron.
Yeah.
And then I was sent down to Buckingham Palace to get my
To
DFC.
get your DFC. Yeah.
And,
And your nice new uniform,
oh yeah,
which you'd have by that
all
time.
dry cleaned and all.
Yes.
And so the king was there, and the chancellor, the Lord Chancellor was there, and Lord Louis Mountbatten
Was
there with the cushion, with my little medal on it.
Oh,
And the king, we were very well briefed
yeah.
what to do. We were in a large, large chamber. It wasn't wallpaper. It was like red satin with a design on it, you know.
Yeah.
And the equerry came in and told us all, take off our rings
Oh, really? Yeah.
because you might hurt the king's hand.
And my.
Undo your shoelaces and knot them because you might trip.
Oh.
And don't ask the king to repeat a question because he stammers and gets nervous.
Oh,
And all these
all the
questions.
little things, yeah.
So there we are in a mess of sweat. And the last thing as we're leaving the room to go out, someone says, there's a yellow dot and an orange dot. On the yellow dot, you turn left. On the orange dot, you turn left and bow because the king will be there. So there you are. And they gave us a towel with alum on it. And our hands were soaking wet. And this dried off our hands, you see, so that when we shook hands with the king, there it is. You locked right off. But he had a very, very marvelous presence about him. And I remember, people say you forget those things, but I don't. I remember everything he said. And he was pleased that we were there. did we like the place.
And he really meant it too. He was
did,
a dear
yeah.
man.
And he asked if I had seen him when he was in Canada.
Canada, right.
And I, at that time, had been a scoutmaster.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were at New Glasgow railway station,
When he arrived,
and had all my little cubs all tied together,
Oh, yeah.
so that, you know, if one fainted, the others could pick them up. And I'm feeding sugar cubes to them all so they don't have to go to the bathroom. And when the king and queen are on the train and they get up, the first thing they see are these little boys all tied together.
Yeah.
That came up at my investiture.
Oh,
yeah. So did you see those little boys all tied together? So they were my wolf cubs.
yeah. Isn't that nice?
So anyway, I from there, I went to OTU,
Yeah.
and after a while there, I went down to RCS station at Bournemouth,
Yeah.
and I was made the officer in charge of aircrew reselection.
Oh, okay.
As the aircrew would come from Canada, a 230-pound pilot would not go in a Spitfire; he'd have to go in a bomber.
I see. That was the.
Yeah.
You discerned this.
A stammering navigator would have to go on weather reconnaissance, and not bomber command.
Yeah, that's right.
We had to do it on that basis.
Yeah.
And not necessarily did they know why we made our decision.
Exactly. Yeah.
And after a while on that, I was selected, by the way,
Yeah.
to be the officer commanding the RCAF detachment on the first Battle of Britain parade
Yeah.
in London,
Yeah.
when it was considered safe to do so.
Yeah.
And I have a nice photograph of that.
Oh,
It shows
isn't
me
that
marching
nice?
past
Yeah.
Buckingham Palace.
Yeah. With.
And that was an interesting thing. And then I was sent home on 3 months' leave.
Were you?
Yeah.
Oh.
During which time D-Day was transpired.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was reporting back overseas, I had to go to New York. Oh, you mentioned about the Victory Loan thing you were on one time.
Yeah.
They sent me all across the country on the
On the.
6th Victory Loan drive.
Did they? Did they?
Yeah, the V before I, victory
Yeah.
before self.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was a most interesting trip.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, they also offered me command of a wireless school, but I had already promised to go back
Oh yeah.
and take command of a training wing in England,
Yeah.
which I did.
Did you enjoy that?
Oh, yes.
Do you like living in England?
Yes.
I loved it.
Yeah. It was interesting on the way over. I was also made a troop deck officer on the Queen Mary. And there's this wing commander sharing my cabin, and he came rushing in one afternoon and says, "My God, Jim, get up on top deck quick, there's something happening."
Yeah.
What? Well, you'll see when you get there.
Yeah.
So I got up there, and here there's obviously something happening under a red blanket. And what am I supposed to do about that? So everybody's looking at me, and they're all smiles from ear to ear. I thought, oh, well, here goes. Close my eyes, lift up. And it was two little pilot officers pulling a spoof on me.
Oh.
Little did they know that I was going to be the commanding officer of the training wing where they would be.
Headed.
Yeah. I wasn't sitting behind my desk 3 days. When the sergeant major comes in and says, "Sir, I have two chaps that missed their parade this morning." I said, "Well, march them in."
Yeah.
There they are, those two.
Yeah.
Oh, their chin dropped lower than mine,
yeah.
you know. But that was fun.
Yeah.
So I served in training wing until Easter Sunday morning in 1945, when the commanding officer called a staff meeting. And he says, "Jim, close down your training wing.
Yeah.
We have a communique from the War Office, and all the RCAF prisoners of war in Germany are being liberated, and they're going to come to this base, and you will have to set up an organization to rehabilitate them and repatriate them."
Wow.
So that was it. So I looked after 3,842 RCAF.
What size staff would you have to do that?
I had 10. But I also had the whole station because on the conference the CO said everybody supports Jim Lovelace. The supply section, pay section, food section, the whole bit.
Yeah, little I know of you, you'd love that, though.
I know, yes.
Oh, yeah. The
I
harder it is, the bigger it is, the better.
Yeah. And I especially was careful to make sure that all the Nova Scotians would have a special hotel,
Of course.
special attention,
Yeah.
and first at the head of the parade and the whole day.
Good.
That was fun, too.
Yeah. Now, you were there for how long did you remain?
Well, I remember D-Day.
Yeah. That's getting toward the end of the war now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I remember all the bells started ringing.
Yeah.
You see, during the war, there are no church bells.
Yes.
They would
Oh, yes,
only ring in the event of an invasion
Right.
or
Yeah.
victory.
Yeah.
And here we had victory.
Victory,
And all the
yeah.
bells were ringing. And I got up from my desk.
Yeah.
I went to the balcony, which
Yeah.
overlooked the main street in Bournemouth.
Yeah.
And the people started coming into their homes. And I expected that they would be cheering,
Yeah.
flag waving.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
They weren't.
No.
Half of them were crying
Yeah.
because they were remembering the people that were not there. Should have been
And
there.
the terrible effort it took everybody.
And that affected me.
Yeah.
And my mind also recalled all my friends in the Air Force, who disappeared.
Of course.
And that was a very poignant moment for me.
Yeah.
But shortly after that, the A-bomb fell.
Yeah.
And then I was sent home, or I came home
Right.
with the last draft of the POWs returning to Canada.
Yeah.
And I got into Dalhousie Law School.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
And I was in the lineup, actually, at RCAF station Dartmouth in those days.
Oh.
And I was going to take my release from the Air Force
Yeah.
when Frankie Wade, Air Commodore,
Yeah.
came up and said, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
So I told him. He said, "No,
Yeah.
you're not." He said, "You be in my office in the morning,
Yeah.
9 o'clock."
Yeah.
And he called the squadron leader over in charge of the outfit. He said, "Make sure the squadron leader Lovelace's books." I was the squadron leader by then.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And his documents are in my office. And then he told me I was now the aide-de-camp to the first pilot in the British Empire, John A.D. McCurdy.
Oh, my.
And it turned out that Mr. McCurdy had selected me himself because I was the first wireless operator in the Canadian Air Force to go on air operations, which he apparently knew about.
It's a singular honor you were given already.
Yeah, and I was the first wireless operator in any Air Force to get the DFC. So.
Oh.
And he was the first pilot in the British Empire.
Was he?
I found out,
Yeah,
we used
yeah.
to sit down, we'd crack a bottle of Johnny Walker Black Label
Yes.
or something, and sit in the front balcony. Now, everybody thinks the front balcony is supposed to be on Barrington Street.
Yes,
It is. It overlooks the harbour.
Yeah.
And many's the tale,
Yeah.
was I told,
Yeah.
about Dr. Alexander Graham Bell,
Yeah.
Casey Baldwin, Tom Selfridge,
Yeah.
and all those boys, and John A.D. McCurdy,
Yeah.
and what they did at Bedeck.
Oh, really?
And
really?
I'm writing a book about that right now.
Are you? Yeah.
Yes, with photographs.
Yeah.
And I found out that there's as you come into the city in Sydney, as you enter almost by Alexandra Street as you're coming into the city.
Yeah.
But at one time it was it was not in the city
Yeah.
at all. Is this place called the McCurdy Mansion.
Yeah.
And that was John A.D. McCurdy's uncle, Howard McCurdy. And Dr. Bell used to travel into Sydney and meet with William Marconi.
Marconi. Okay. Yeah.
And they would discuss things.
Yeah.
And Dr. Bell one time said, "Why is it that you have to stick an iron pole in the ground for that contraption to work?" And Marconi is reputed to have said, "Well, I have no idea, but all I know is that it works." So this is the way things were, I guess.
Yeah.
So Dr. Bell asked him if he could design one for a ship at sea.
Yeah.
And he says, "I don't know. We leave that to the Navy, I think." He said,
Yeah.
"Well, how about me? I want one for an airplane." So Marconi did.
Oh.
And later on, the New York Daily Telegraph had a contest for the
Yeah.
first person to fly across the Gulf of Mexico
Yeah.
from Key West to Havana.
Yeah.
McCurdy went. And he had a wireless set on board that airplane,
Yeah.
the first time in the world that would happen.
Yeah.
And he sent a position report halfway across the Gulf, making him the first airborne radio operator in the world.
Oh.
And there's a connection,
Oh, yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah. Oh,
Now I have some very
yeah.
interesting stories
I
to
bet you
tell
do.
about
Now,
that.
you mentioned you're writing a book now.
Yes, I have already written a book.
I know. Yeah.
That was called The Flip Side of the Earth, with the things that should never have been mentioned.
Mentioned, right.
Yeah. I did.
So what are you doing? What's this one going to be?
This one is going to be called The Marconi Connection,
Oh,
subtitled
Yeah.
The Key Men.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Well, now. So anyway, you got back here, and when did you discharge? You got discharged, or
I went,
Actually,
I
you
was
went
put
to-
on primary reserve while I
Yeah,
was aide de camp,
yes.
and I went to Dalhousie Law School.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And the dean of law in those days didn't like me to be an aide de camp at all, because my picture was in the paper every other day,
Yes, sure.
including the time the IODE had a
Yeah.
national convention here. Oh,
Yeah.
God. Anyway, can I tell you about that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We're just getting down to time is
Yeah.
becoming a little iffy.
Okay.
So, okay.
We had this IODE convention at the Nova Scotian Hotel.
Yeah.
And Walter Garnier, the chauffeur at the time, who's still there, God bless him, he and I used to time the distance from Government House to where the event was going to take place. So
Yeah.
we drove up to the Nova Scotian. I briefed the IODE on what was going to happen. You must stand at the head of the stairs on South Park Street and stay there.
Yeah.
The governor will come, get out of the car, come up the steps and meet you.
Yeah.
Great. We went back to Government House, and the governor's top hat couldn't be found. But I found an opera hat. So I said, now, sir, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
When we get there, you have to hand me the hat and then get out of the car. Then I'll hand the hat back.
to you.
Then you climb the stairs.
Yeah.
However, we didn't bank on two things.
Yeah.
The wind had come up to about 40 knots.
Oh.
The ladies are standing there in their gowns, flopping away, and the
Yes,
flags
yes.
are going like crazy,
Yeah.
holding onto the poles and leaning over with the wind. And the governor gets out of the car. He's the national president is totally overcome with emotion, runs down the steps, looking at a square-rigged ship in full sail. And the governor has a fit. His eyeballs pop out like organ sops. He hits his hat on the roof of the car. It falls off. I run after the hat. By this time, he's all as snarled in the gowns as the poor lady from the national president.
Yeah.
Anyway, we get inside, and the conference takes place, and the governor starts off, says, ladies and gentlemen of the Imperious Order. I says, that's not right, is it? So we fixed him up on that. Anyway, from there, peacetime,
Yeah.
I went to Greenwood.
Yes.
God bless this place, Greenwood.
Greenwood. Yeah.
Then I was the first and only alien officer ever to command an American unit.
Oh,
was
so you
sent-
went to Washington, didn't you?
Yeah, and I was put in command of a military, what they call military air transport service detachment of the American Air Force. And then I went to the Pentagon. I was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Yeah.
Then I went to Staff College. Then I became
Yeah.
Senior Air Staff Officer at Edmonton, where I was in command of all flying in Western Canada and the Arctic. Then I became the Material and Logistics Officer for the DEW Line. Then I went to military intelligence in the Department of Air Intelligence, where I was monitoring the Russian long-range Air Force. And that was a scary job.
Yeah.
Then after that, I went to England, where I became the Chief Liaison Officer to the British Air Ministry. And from there, I retired.
You retired.
I never got tired, though.
No. And now you're writing books.
And now I'm writing books.
Books, yes. And
But
looking
books
very
have more
healthy.
jokes in them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, this, I'm afraid the time is running out on us, but I'm very afraid.
It's been fun.
But it's been fun, and, we've only done a fraction. We've only done a fraction. I'd like to change my suit and get you and do your private life now. But
Well, that has
perhaps one
that
day
has
we'll
some
do that.
moments in it, too.
Yes. But anyway, it was just an outstandingly wonderful career.
Thank
And
you.
it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you
And
very,
I'm
very
sure
much.
that you will enjoy this tape when you get it and see it.
Well, I hope so. I want to thank you
much.
very much for thinking about me enough to have me here.
Oh, my
Very
goodness. Have you
Good.
back anytime.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we have been listening to the amazing career of Mr. James Cameron Lovelace. And it's been a tremendous pleasure for me. And I'm sure anyone watching this tape will get as big a charge out of it as I've had talking to this very wonderful gentleman.
Thank you.
And before I go, I'd like to thank the crew here at Eastlink, who are always such a great help. And I'd like to thank my buddy here, this chap, Larry Caldwell, who produces this thing. And I'd like to thank you all for watching. And do look again. Thank you. Where are you?
We were at near the airport at Lim.
Lynn.